Every superhero has an origin story. Peter Parker was bit by a bug and he became Spider-Man. So Clark Kent was sent from the planet Krypton, and later in life he became Superman. My story is something similar. How many of you guys have been asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Raise your hands. Tough question, right? When I was small, I was asked this question multiples of times. But I was sure about a few things. I did not want to become a doctor. I hate going to hospitals, and I'm just scared of injections. I don't want to become a psychologist because, it's just not my thing. Any psychologists in the house? Any psychos? No psychos. Sorry. Okay. But if there was one thing I was really good at, it was numbers. It was mathematics. I was in love with numbers and mathematics. And somehow the world of numbers led me to the world of finance. Ladies and gentlemen, I was one of those weird kids who used to be amazed on that guy on TV who said things like, the stock market reached all-time high, the real estate market crashed, inflation is 5% more. Trust me, I do not know what that meant at all. But it just sounded very exhilarating, But what piqued my interest in finance, what bit me, in other words, was the year 2008. When a few banks in the West, in the US, collapsed, and it triggered a domino effect of the global financial crisis. Now, how many of you guys have heard about this global financial crisis thing? How many of you guys really understand the intricacies of it? Okay, we have one, we have two. Some people know what happened. But it's generally a very complex topic, right? Many commentators, when they talk about the financial crisis, they talk about the global slowdown, few banks collapsing. But they miss the human element. The impact the crisis had on people like me and you. This was actually best described by Ban Ki-moon, who was the Secretary General of the UN. He said, the ranks of the global unemployed have increased by 34 million, and more than 214 million women and men have become working poor. And for the first time in human history, more than 1 billion people are going hungry worldwide. The moral argument is clear. After all, those who were least responsible for the global economic meltdown have paid the highest price in terms of lost jobs, higher cost of living, and growing community tensions as communities struggle, as families struggle to make ends meet. Why did this happen? Why did the world experience so much stress? Few banks in the West, in the US, decided to be careless, decided to be irresponsible in the way they deal with your money, other people's money. But what really amazed me and what really blew my mind was something which IMF did. It's in those times that IMF and the world started talking about something called Islamic Finance. And it's from the ashes of the global financial crisis that the world, many of the world gurus started seeing potential in this obscure field called Islamic Finance. Just to let you know, these two words have been in the industry for the past 1,000 years. But after 2008, something interesting happened. The IMF. How many of you guys have heard about IMF? The International Monetary Fund. They are, you can say to a large extent, a watchdog of the global economy. And they said something fascinating in 2008, 2009. They said Islamic banks showed stronger resilience than conventional banks in average during the financial crisis. They also said that Islamic banks performed better than conventional banks during financial crisis. When I read this, I was in 10th standard in school, and I was blown away about, this idea. How can a system backed by faith of all things, could have solution to mankind's problems. Then I started thinking that if we had a system which was Islamic, or in this case, Islamic banking, it could have solved so many of global ills, so many of global challenges. So, let me tell you one thing. This happened 10 years ago. As I said, I was in 10th grade. But in that time, in those last 10 years, I decided to study finance, economics, and Islamic banking. And I learned a great deal about the world financial structures, about credit, about debt. And let me tell you one thing. Debt, credit, finance, it's a wonderful thing. The idea that people like me and you, who don't have much money, but can go to a bank, borrow money to buy their dream houses, buy a car, start a business, and pay later. Maybe even go for a vacation with the bank's money. It's something interesting, fascinating. This was not possible 10 years ago. But I'm also convinced that finance is a double-edged sword. While it can be used to do so much good, if left uncontrolled, it can open a Pandora's box of global challenges. That's what we have seen in the last 10 years. And my today's talk, I will just talk about two areas. Just two areas. Islamic finance is better than conventional finance in addressing some of the world's biggest issues. First one, protecting the poor from the adverse effects of interest. Now, many commentators, when they talk about Africa as a continent, they say that Africans are poor because of endemic corruption. They don't know how to manage their resources, apparently. But let's hear the word of Mr. Obasanjo, who is the former president of Nigeria and the chairman of the African Union. He said something which everybody should listen. All that we had borrowed up to 1985, 1986 was $5 billion. How much? $5 billion. And we have paid $16 billion. How much did they pay? And yet we are being told that we owe $28 billion. That $28 billion came because of the injustice in the foreign creditors' interest rates. If you ask me what is the worst thing in the world, I will say to you, it is compounded interest. Ladies and gentlemen, is there a solution for this? Is there a solution for countries like Africa and countries in Asia, many of our countries, against the effects of compounded interest? Let's go back to Islamic finance. As many of you guys may have known, Islam and many other world religions, whether it's Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, dealing in interest is strictly prohibited. In other words, if I have 10 dinars, I cannot lend any one of you and say, I want 11 dinars back. That's just not ethically right, according to many of our scriptures. So, what's the logic behind this? There are two ways of looking at this. When you advance money to somebody, either you're doing for assistance, or you want to have a share of the profit, right? So if it's given money for the share of assistance, you cannot have anything more and above. However, if you're advancing money for having a share of the profits, you should have a share of the loss also. These are the principles of justice. You have to bear the risk of loss as well as the potential for profits. If Nigeria or if any other country or any individuals would have used this paradigm, they wouldn't have seen their 5 billion gone to 16 billion to 28 billion, and they would have been much better off. Another fascinating case study is India. Now, India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world with a population of 2 billion and more, perhaps. I come from India. While it's a great place to be in general, it has issues. My country has issues. Farmer suicide. Every year, thousands upon thousands of farmers commit suicide because they cannot pay back loans to the banks, which they bought for buying fertilizers. Right? Just in Maharashtra alone, more than 12,000 people died in the last 3 years, which is an average of 10 suicides every single day. Is there a solution? Let's hear to the words of M.S. Swaminathan, who is the father of the Green Indian Revolution. He said this, that Islamic banking, which propagates zero interest-based lending, could hold this solution, could hold the key to solving farmers' suicide crisis. Fascinating, right? Next, I would like to talk about the role of ethics in finance. Most of us are fairly ethical individuals in this room, I would assume, right? And we want to see the good for the world. We don't want anybody to become sick, everybody to be happy, happy family life, happy personal life, and successful careers. However, many of us keep money in banks, which also have individuals run by individuals like us. But the business model they have contradicts whatever they stand for in general. For example, there are many companies in the world, actually most financial institutions in the world, big ones at least, finance the tobacco sector. Last year alone, more than 7 million people died because of tobacco use. And guess what? Since 2013, more than 27 financial institutions in Europe at least have lent $56 billion to companies like Philip Morris and American British Tobacco, supporting alcohol consumption. Of course, in many cultures it is fine and acceptable to drink alcohol, but nobody disagrees that alcohol is harmful. In fact, many times divorces happen just because of alcohol consumption and overdose of it. So you have institutions like HSBC, JP Morgan, Citibank who actively lend to breweries and alcohol companies who serve alcohol. Illegal weapons financing. Many firms, many institutions actually finance weapon producers, the weapons of which are used in wars like Syria and Lebanon. And last but not least, casino and gambling. Companies like Wells Fargo, they actually have a page on the website saying that we have a dedicated team of professionals, who want to support the casinos and the gambling sector, right? You can just check it out. That's there on their website. So, is this the right thing? Do we want our families to be hurt by these negative forces? No, right? But is there an alternative, sir? Really, do we have any other option? Well, in the Islamic banking model, institutions, individuals are not allowed to deal in regard to anything with the sin sector, whether it's alcohol, tobacco, pornography, weapons, or anything which results in gambling. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Islamic banks is all about empowering communities to meet their aspirations in a way that does not damage or destroy families and societies. So what are the two things I discussed? First, protecting from the adverse effects of interest. And second, cutting the lines to the sin sector. Because of developments like these, you guys know this lady? How many of you guys heard about Christine Lagarde? She's a fascinating lady to hear from. She is recently the ex-managing director of the IMF. And she said something interesting. She said Islamic finance has in principle to promote financial stability. And she has many more interesting statements in the same line. Well, while Islamic finance makes actually systematic sense, it also has business sense. London, which hosts the Olympic Village, was partly financed, or the Olympic Village was partly financed using Islamic modalities. Even the Shard, which is the tallest building in Western Europe, was actually partly financed using Islamic options. And many companies like these, Virgin, BMW, Toyota, our favorite, Al-Marhai, Saudi Aramco, were also benefited from Islamic financial options. Now, I had started my talk with an origin story. Let me tell you this. I'm not a superhero. None of us in this room actually are superheroes. But we all have a superpower. And it's the power to see that whenever there is exploitation, whenever there is corruption, whenever there is mishandling of resources, whenever there is injustice, you have the power to correct things. You have the power to change. And Margaret Mead said something powerful in the same lines. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. It is the only thing that ever has. And it's in the spirit of changing the world for the better that I believe Islamic and ethical finance is an idea worth spreading. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.